In the quiet village of Umofia, Obinna was known as the town drunkard. He spent his days and nights with a calabash of palm wine in his hand, stumbling through the streets, singing old songs that only he seemed to remember. Because of his drinking, the villagers dismissed him as a fool, someone whose words held no weight. But what they didn't know was that Obinna possessed a gift, a curse, some might say. He could see the spirits of the dead. It started one night as Obinna was weaving his way home from the tavern. As he passed the old baobab tree, he saw a figure standing in the moonlight. It was an old woman, her face familiar, but her eyes hollow and her skin pale as a ghost. "Good evening, Mama Amora," Obinna greeted her, thinking nothing of it. He had seen spirits before, and though they startled him at first, he had grown used to their presence. Mama Amora turned slowly to face him, her eyes widening in shock. "Obinna, you can see me." "Of course, I can see you." "Why wouldn't I?" he replied, puzzled. "Obinna, I am dead," she said softly, her voice carrying the sough of the grave. "I was murdered by a stranger who came to our village. He is hiding among us, and he has been killing our people one by one." Obinna felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard the rumors, the whispers that more villagers were dying than usual. The elders had performed countless rituals, sacrificing animals and offering prayers to the gods, but nothing had stopped the deaths. And now, standing before him, was the spirit of a woman claiming to know the truth. Without another word, Obinna ran to the village square. It was late, but the villagers were still gathered, discussing the recent tragedies and searching for solutions. Obinna burst into the circle, panting and wild-eyed. "I know who's behind the killings," he shouted. "It's not the gods, it's a man, a stranger hiding in our village." The villagers turned to look at him, and the laughter began almost immediately. They mocked him, waving him off as a drunken fool. The elder, a stern man with a deep voice, spoke up. "Obinna, we have no time for your drunken tales. This is a serious matter." "But I spoke with Mama Amora's spirit," Obinna insisted. "She told me everything." The laughter grew louder, and the elder shook his head. "Go home, Obinna. Do not bring your madness into our discussions." Dejected, Obinna returned to his hut, but the spirits would not leave him in peace. Every night, they came to him, the spirits of those who had been killed. They wept and pleaded with him, begging him to expose their killer. Obinna tried everything he could think of. He spoke to the elders again, tried to gather evidence, but no one would listen. His reputation as a drunkard overshadowed his warnings. Desperate, Obinna decided to take matters into his own hands. He needed help, and he found it in Eo, a small, sharp-eyed boy who had always been curious about the world around him. Obinna told Eo about the killer, and though the boy was frightened, he agreed to help. "Follow the stranger," Obinna instructed him. "Watch him closely. If he does anything suspicious, let me know." Eo nodded, determined to help. For days, he shadowed the stranger, careful not to be seen. Then, one dark night, Eo saw something that made his blood run cold. The stranger, whose name was John, crept out of his house, moving stealthily through the shadows. Eo followed, keeping a safe distance. John led him deep into the forest, where the moonlight barely penetrated the thick canopy. Eo watched in horror as John set a trap, baiting it with food and shiny objects. Soon, a young man from the village, unaware of the danger, walked into the trap. Eo pulled out his phone, recording every terrifying moment as John ambushed the man, brutally killing him and hiding the body. The next morning, Eo, trembling with fear, ran to Obinna's hut. "I have proof," he whispered, holding up his phone. Obinna's heart raced as he watched the video. He knew this was his chance to finally be heard. Clutching the phone, Obinna hurried to the village square, where another meeting was taking place. The villagers were discussing the most recent death, the very man Eo had seen killed the night before. As Obinna approached, the elder frowned. "Obinna, we told you to stay away from these meetings." But Obinna was not to be deterred. "I have proof," he shouted. The crowd fell silent, and for the first time, they looked at him with something other than contempt. Reluctantly, the elder gestured for him to speak. Obinna held up the phone and played the video. Gasps of horror filled the air as the villagers watched John's monstrous actions unfold on the screen. The elder's face paled. This is undeniable." The villagers were shocked, angry, and ashamed for not believing Obinna sooner. They immediately called the authorities, and John was arrested, his crimes exposed for all to see. From that day forward, Obinna was no longer just the village drunkard. He was hailed as a hero, the man who had saved the village from a terrible evil. The single women of Umuofia, who once ignored him, now saw him in a new light. They vied for his attention, each hoping to be the one to marry the man who had been brave enough to stand against the darkness. And as for Obinna, he finally found peace, not just with the spirits that had haunted him, but within himself, knowing that he had been the one to protect his people when no one else could.